The news that Joseline's fiancé has moved on and is married to another woman has left her in utter disbelief. As Joseline sat on the edge of her bed, the dim light emanating from the lamp that was placed next to her bed shed a piercing light on the otherwise dark room. The screen of her phone was broken, and it was lying in front of her as a representation of the emotional devastation that had occurred over the course of the previous few hours. The idea that she was a strong woman, someone who could manage the ups and downs of life with tenacity, was something that she had always imagined herself to be. But what about this? This seemed like a strike to the very center of her existence, one that left her gasping for oxygen and attempting to fathom how everything had turned upside down in such a short period of time. Her fiancé, Michael, the man with whom she had planned a future and the person whom she believed would be at her side for the rest of her life, had deceived her in the most inconceivable way. Not only did the split cause her world to be shattered, but the fact that he had moved on so swiftly was also a contributing factor. The city was filled with rumors that were difficult to ignore. On the other hand, Michael had discovered another person, a lady who was now carrying his kid. The mere thought of that caused Joseline's heart to stop beating. What the heck might be going on here? I don't understand how he could so simply forget the years they spent together, the aspirations they both had, and the life they started together. In the most unfavorable way possible, the news came to her like a freight train, completely taking her by surprise. It had begun as a rumor, something that had been passed along by a buddy who had heard the talk on the situation. In the beginning, Joseline made an effort to disregard it, holding to the hope that it was all a mistake. She was aware of this, but she knew better. The indications had been present for a considerable amount of time, including the emotional distance, the late-night phone calls, and the coldness that had gradually introduced itself into their relationship. She dismissed it, certain that things would improve and that their love could endure any storm. She was confident that things would get better. However, when she was on the brink of experiencing a heartbreak, she came to the realization that she had been living in a delusion. At the same time that her fingers were shaking, she reached for her phone and unlocked it. She then began composing a message to Michael. "We need to have a conversation. I implore you not to disregard me." The message, however, remained in her inbox without being sent. Is there any point to this? Is there even anything else that could be said? More than just an emotional betrayal, the betrayal was also physical. Despite the fact that Michael had only been in a relationship with this new woman for a few months, it seemed as though things had proceeded at a breakneck pace. It was the culmination of their whirlwind affair when she revealed that she was expecting a child. Joseline's thoughts were unable to comprehend what was going on. The timeline did not make sense to me. In spite of the fact that he had spent very little time with Joseline over the past few months, he was nonetheless beginning a family with another person. Because of this, Joseline felt a wave of sickness sweep over her as she thought about it. She had no idea that the signs were there. Could it be that her love for him had caused her to be so oblivious that she had disregarded all of the warning signs? It had been a very long time since she had allowed herself to cry, but the pain was so awful that she could not endure it any longer. Her eyes welled up with tears, each one carrying the weight of a relationship that was falling apart and of a future that was slipping away from her grasp. Michael's behavior when she confronted him was the most upsetting aspect of the situation. His demeanor had been icy and distant, as if the years they had spent together had been of no consequence. When she inquired about the rumors, he responded by saying, "It's not what you think," which was his response. "It's not that I want to hurt you, Joseline, it's just that things weren't going the way we wanted them to between us. This marks the beginning of a new chapter for me." Even though his remarks were painful, the thing that hurt the most was the complete absence of empathy. It appeared as though he had already emotionally checked out, leaving Joseline alone in the ruins of the situation. The fact that he had moved on so swiftly was not the only thing that was problematic, it was also the manner in which he disregarded their past as if it were nothing. How is it possible for someone who had sworn to love you forever and who had shared their goals and dreams with you to abandon you with such ease? In her mind, Joseline had always envisioned herself as the person who would be the one to make Michael's aspirations come true. Her image of the future included them getting married, purchasing a home together, and having children together. On the other hand, as she sat there in the silence of her chamber, she came to the realization that none of her plans would ever be carried out. The life that they had previously envisioned for themselves appeared to be so far away now that it caused her heart to hurt as she thought about their future. Once more, her phone buzzed, which caused her to stop her thoughts. A notice from social media informed me that Michael had uploaded a picture to his account. The picture was a selfie of him and his new girlfriend, both of them smiling and holding each other with their arms around each other. Her expression was one of happiness and excitement. In addition, Michael had put the following in the caption: "A new chapter begins. I am looking forward to what lies ahead." Joseline was unable to control her behavior. An expression of incredulity crossed her face as she scanned the snapshot with her eyes before clicking on the post. Joseline was left behind, drowning in the aftermath of what felt like an emotional earthquake. There they were, two individuals who had just begun their adventure together. Joseline was left behind. She felt another wave of sickness wash over her as she continued to stare at the photo. The fact that they had problems was something she had understood from the beginning, but she never in her wildest dreams imagined that it would come to this ordeal. How was it possible for him to be so content with another person while she was left to pick up the pieces of her broken heart? The discomfort was tangible, and it was a persistent agony that she was unable to get rid of. It was chewing at her insides. The memories she had of them, as well as the times they had spent together, served as a painful reminder of what she had lost. She recalled their first date, how they had laughed together over dinner, and how she had felt like the happiest woman in the world to be with him. She reminisced about how they had laughed together. She recalled the excursions they had taken together and the hopes and aspirations they had both expressed for the future. It all seemed like a lie to me at this point. The atmosphere in the room was oppressive, and the burden of her melancholy was crushing down on her chest. After rising to her feet, Joseline made her way to the window, where she gazed out at the shadowy street below. As if she were unconscious of the storm that was raging inside of her, the world seemed to continue on. Her envy was directed toward those individuals who were able to go about their lives without the burden of heartbreak acting as a constraint. But even in the middle of the gloom, a glimmer of insight started to make its way into their consciousness. This agony, despite the fact that it was intolerable, would eventually go away. Due to the fact that she had been in love with Michael for such a long time, she had stopped remembering what it was like to be independent and powerful. She had constructed her identity on their relationship, predicated on the notion that she was a component of something that was more significant. However, at this point, she was no longer able to avoid the realization that she was sufficient on her own. Her life was her own, and she had a life to live. It was impossible for her to continue to cling to the past, to a future that was no longer a possibility. Even though the pain was still fresh and the wounds were still raw, Joseline was confident that she would eventually recover from the grief. From this, she would emerge more powerful and more knowledgeable. On the other hand, for the time being, all she could do was sit with her anguish, allow it to wash over her, and give herself the opportunity to grieve. She would never forget what she had dropped, but she would eventually learn to forgive herself for the part she had played in clinging to something that was no longer meant to be. She would never forget what she had lost. She was well versed in overcoming obstacles, but the road that lay before of her would be challenging. She made a commitment to herself that she would emerge from this experience more powerful than she had ever been before. After wiping away her tears, Joseline picked up her phone once more and continued to use it. On this occasion, she did not send a message to Michael. Rather, she typed something different, a message to herself. There is room for you. You are deserving of everyone's affection and respect. Happiness will be found for you once more. So with that, she hit the send button.